It's time for us to have a talk about Steam because quite a few stories are going on with it. Steam has actually been banned in one country, it is being investigated in another country for anti-competitive practices, and that's the kind of thing that basically is just going to be a headache for Valve going forward. They have a really strong position in the market, and all the big publishers know they have got to port their games onto PC to survive, and to do that well, you basically have got to do it in Steam. And just that concentration of power means they're going to catch more flack naturally. So we'll talk about that, but also for devs who are already on Steam, there is some good news actually on the story of the Adult Swim games catalog and its delisting. That really sucked, and there's good news there. And also, one developer has basically had all that he can take of Steam user-generated tags, basically selling his game to the wrong audience, and he's trying to fight back. It's a really weird story, a case where a dev's made a real cool game, but has absolutely found himself in quite the pickle. And we would be in quite the pickle without the help of today's sponsor. Our mates over at boot.dev, whose mission it is to teach you back-end web development. They use Python and Go, and they do it in the smart way by actually making it fun. It's because they're an online self-paced platform that's 100% designed to get you writing code, and not just any code. They are also gamers, so it's a lot of problems that are inspired by the sorts of things that we'll understand, like even a basic, RPG combat system. They have quests, levels, XP, achievements on the site, all that good stuff, and you can get 25% off your first purchase with my link and code, which is Bellular News. Now, they have an incredible and very complete learning path. I mean, just take a look. And to give you an example of their approach, one of their modules is developing and deploying a Pokédex. Another is learning object-oriented programming by working through RPG combat examples. So it's the sort of approach that actually leverages things you'll naturally understand from playing video games to help those concepts click. And what I love is actually Boots, their AI chatbot. It shocked me, because rather than just giving you an answer to your problem, it actually works you through how to unblock yourself and solve the problem yourself. It's honestly one of the only times that I've seen a chatbot like that and actually liked it. I was surprised. So if you go to boot.dev/Bellular News and use code Bellular News, you'll get 25% off your first purchase, and that's backed by their no questions asked 30-day money-back guarantee. And to sample their content and see all the free demos, again, you can just click my link. So thanks, Boot, and let's roll. Okay, the banning of Steam. Of course, as we've been reminded pretty frequently over the last few weeks with the whole PlayStation Network mess, Steam is very much a global platform, but recently it's just got a little bit less global, and that's because the whole thing is gone in Vietnam. Now, this has been sourced all the way back to VietnamNet, which suggests that this may have came because of complaints from local publishers and developers, right? So they've basically got their government to ban Steam. It's kind of crazy. So here's a quote for you. Steam is blatantly distributing games in Vietnam, including violent games and adult games without asking for permission. This is unfair for domestic distributors. Management agencies need to tighten control over the cross-border platform, or domestic game distributors will die in the home market. So this is actually where it gets fascinating for us, because it's not really a problem we deal with in most of our countries, but for them it kind of is different. For example, and kind of similar to what goes on with the Chinese version of Steam, loads of games released in Vietnam are required to edit out the blood, right? And violence can only go so far. Unlike with China, Steam have not built their own version of the platform to be compliant in that region. So even though Steam can sell games in Vietnamese dong, they actually don't have to play by the rules of the country. And then that immediately puts distributors in the region at a disadvantage, because if you're a Vietnamese game distributor, well, tough luck, right? You've got to comply with the government. But if the mighty network of Gabe Newell is all across the world and supports your currency, then why is anyone going to go and get the version of a game from you, the local Vietnamese distributor, right? So it's not really a surprise that the regulator has got loads of complaints, and this is actually similar to how they also got Netflix challenged for offering their games with no modification for that market as well. So one way of looking at this story, and it would be really easy to do this, is to say that Valve were out there challenging regional censorship, and that for Vietnamese gamers, this was awesome because they were able to get their video games without any compromising things being done to sell in the region. And that is actually the reality on the ground, and it was awesome for them. But of course, the fact is that Steam do modify their platform all the time in other regions. The most obvious is Steam China existing, but Steam actually do still geoblock certain purchases for users in Germany based on content. Icons such as a certain Hindu symbol, I believe. Pretty obvious reasons why. But what's interesting is the German law about National Socialist iconography that was lifted in the country in 2018. So even though that was lifted in Germany, actually some of that stuff is still being applied by Steam. And of course, if you buy a game in Russia, then of course it ends up getting geo-locked to stop cheap key grifting. Where games just end up on key reselling websites. And then of course, depending on the region you're in, you actually can't use your local currency to pay directly on Steam. Instead, you end up using Steam's own currency conversion into, examples like MENA USD or LATAM USD, right? So a funny little thing that most people don't know. This ends up basically falling into the opposite problem that Sony have got with PlayStation Network. Steam is available in every country to the benefit of customers there and the benefit of Valve. This global revenue is awesome for everybody involved, but of course there are the requirements of all of those global countries. And if you're global first and you're only not global if a regional problem crops up, then, for Valve it ends up in a situation like this. And if your bottom line is going to be threatened, as it was with some of the stuff in China, then you will end up having an incentive to do something like deploy Steam China. So realistically, this is far less a case of Steam doing a righteous anti-censorship thing. It's not really that. It's rather that they just don't see enough money in Vietnam to bother doing anything about it. Now, speaking of following the rules, it actually turns out that Valve may be facing some more scrutiny. Now, this was an interesting one. It is the Polish government taking on Steam and Sony. And being real with you, Poland, right? It's a country in the EU. And the EU has been able to swing its whatever about, throw its weight around, let's just say, on anti-competitive matters, right? That's one of the reasons why iPhones went to USB-C. A lot of EU pressure. Of course, you've got the Digital Markets Act. So being in the UK, I cannot use an alternate app. An alternate app store on my iPhone. If I just go across the border into the Republic of Ireland, which, technically is obviously in the EU, whereas Northern Ireland is in the UK, therefore is not in the EU, then I can, then I could use an alternative app store. So a bit of a funny little situation. Point is, though, this is happening with Poland. Poland is in the EU, and I wonder if this is the sort of thing that could end up spiraling, right? That maybe some other countries in the EU may also make a bit of an issue out of this. So if you're in Valve's legal department, this is certainly something that will be across your desk that you'll be thinking about. So this was spotted by Maru NL and Game World Observer. Basically, the Polish Office for Competition and Consumer Protection are starting a preliminary investigation into companies operating in the region for anti-competitive practices, right? So that's what they've said. And this isn't the first we've heard of this story. This is more a major new update in it because they had already done a review of several developers and publishers. They even went to the PlayStation regional office in Poland. So now what they're doing is they're analyzing the evidence. And what they're saying they're looking for is this, right? Evidence of dominant players using their position to enforce anti-competitive rules. And this is what they say it includes: applying restrictions on the sale of games and ancillary content on competing platforms or online stores, interfering with pricing and discount policies of game developers and publishers, or restricting market access to competing platforms and other digital service providers. And you may see that and think, why is a company saying, hey, you can't sell your product in that other store? Well, think about some of the big deals that happen in regular brick and mortar retailers. You actually do have a lot of these big companies with a lot of power playing genuine goddamn hardball with each other. Now, in the case of Valve and Steam, they actually do have a bunch of restrictions on what you can do on other stores. So a lot of the time somebody may say, hey, developer, can I not just buy a DRM-free version of your game on your own website and more of the money will go to you? Well, in many cases for the developer, it's actually better for them to lose the cut to Valve because a sale happening on Steam is probably going to be useful to the Steam algorithm. So it's actually better for a developer's bottom line that Gabe & Co. get their fee because that will just mean more spread in Steam. Anyway, so this is something that Valve have actually been facing in the USA as well, and this is the fact that they mandate that prices on Steam can't be undercut on other stores. And then the other thing, which is the restriction in the sale of games, PlayStation are actually facing a consumer rights tribunal that is relating to basically how they removed the ability to purchase digital games on third-party platforms. So, in both cases here, these are things that have been given enough consideration by the legal system, right, involved in those countries, for it to move from that primary stage to the secondary stage of basically what could end up being a trial, right? So this is actually pretty serious stuff. And again, this is happening in Poland. Poland is an EU country. Look at what's going on with the Digital Markets Act. And of course, there are differences, like obviously between the Apple App Store and Steam, right? Like they are completely different platforms, but still, this is the type of thing the EU are taking real seriously. And I mean, you could totally see, you could see a reality where the EU could end up saying, no, you can't control that, actually. A developer can sell a game for whatever price on their own website. You can't do anything, Steam. Tough luck if you want to operate in the EU and not be fined to shit. So that's the kind of thing that obviously for us as consumers would be positive. For Valve, though, obviously this is something that they're probably going to want to take very seriously in the legal front. Now, this could be specifically relevant in Poland because of GOG, formerly known as Good Old Games. Of course, they're owned by CD Projekt, and if a developer lists their game on GOG cheaper than Steam, then they lose the ability to have their game on the bigger platform. So imagine CD Projekt Red doing a game like, let's just say The Witcher 4. If that was, say, 10% cheaper on GOG because they own it, then they would not be able to sell on Steam whatsoever. Right? Valve would boot them off. And of course you could say that would be silly for Valve to do. Think of all the money that Valve would make from selling that game on Steam, even if people could get a better deal elsewhere. Yes, but the second Valve does that once, well, the whole foundation would just kind of crumble. Other devs would be like, hey, why can we not do what they're doing? So again, this is all just putting pressure on Valve from a policy perspective, and that could impact all of us because we buy games on Steam. All of this basically suggests then that the whole global digital market, the decline of physical games, that it's just making all of this stuff be more important. And, of course, by default, the incumbents like Valve and Sony, they do kind of benefit as things go more and more digital. It's interesting stuff. We don't know how this is going to pan out, but this actually wouldn't be the first time that Valve have had trouble in the EU this decade, because they actually broke EU antitrust law relating to geo-blocking agreements with loads of publishers in 2021, so that kind of got cracked by the EU. And then if Poland decides in this case that it's in line with those EU regulations, then this could really, really impact things. Now, of course, this would be bad for Valve, but what it would mean is more options, more competition, and of course competition is ultimately good for consumers. It's one of those things. Is Valve like literally a monopoly? No, you can buy and sell games in other places. Is it true that Valve has a humongous amount of power? Like, yeah, absolutely, it is true. Now, I think of all of the stores, right, they do seem to be the most benevolent, like given their size. They are fairly pro-consumer. They do give game developers a lot of really good tools, and they've actually built a platform with such good discoverability features that they are more than just a storefront. That's where it gets interesting to me with Valve. They're basically in a game discovery and matchmaking business. Because how many people go to the Epic Games Store, see something, think, oh, that's new, I'll buy it. They don't. Because the Epic Games Store doesn't really do those things that Steam does. So that's where it gets interesting to me. I do see Steam, obviously, as a storefront, but I also see it as a recommendation engine. And so as a developer or a publisher, you do get pros and you do get cons from Steam, but that recommendation engine, my god, it is strong. The next thing then is our friends at Warner Bros., who have finally made a good decision. So I don't know, maybe that feels weird to them. Now, of course, this is not about the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game. No, this is where Warner Bros. Were just very cruelly and needlessly delisting games that had came from the Adult Swim label, and that just meant that a lot of small titles, a lot of pretty beloved, just cool niche things, which is really the whole Adult Swim gist, a lot of those just risked being deleted from the internet, which would have sucked. And it was all because WB would rather delete the Steam pages than do the very simple process on the Steam backend to transfer them, right? Literally it would take minutes for each game. So what happened is Warner Bros. Reached out to at least 2 of the devs involved. This is with Small Radios, Big Televisions, and Duck Game, both being titles that have been spared the axe. And they will actually be reverting all rights and the store pages back to the developers. So this is really good. And this is, again, a great example of comradeship, activism stuff actually working. The devs of these games said, hey, this is shit. Then a lot of people who care about fair play, a lot of people who just think, oh, come on, WB, it would take you so little effort to do the right thing. People who are interested in game preservation, people actually banded together, and look at this. The big, faceless corporation has actually done the right thing because of public pressure. That is one of those times where we have got an objective win because people said, hey, big corporation, no, we don't like that. That being said, it's not a total victory. People reached out to Polygon and they essentially reported that not everybody has got this reprieve. Some more developers have explicitly said that Warner Bros. Are explicitly being moved by the public outcry against the decisions. To be honest, I've got to imagine that is just large corporations are stupid because there are so many layers of approval, right? It's a scale issue. So hopefully the outstanding devs actually do, have the right thing happen because, come on, man. If some corporate bullshit just means that games no longer exist, that sucks for the medium. The next thing then, bulwark and expectation. Because here's the problem, right? Expectations really frame everything. A random game may look like a role-playing game, but if it's more of an ARPG, or, is it a CRPG? Is it something a lot more esoteric? Recently, lots of people, they picked up No Rest for the Wicked because they were interested, of course, in another action role-playing game, and they remember the Ori games being absolutely beautiful. Now, for me, I hopped into that game and immediately loved the Souls-like inspirations. For other people, that will have felt like gravy sludge compared to what they're used to. So it's just one of those things where expectations really do matter. Steam kind of mitigates that by doing user tags. And user tags are, generally speaking, pretty damn great, because you just get to see, vaguely, what are the vibes in this game? And it does mean that if enough people just declare that a game is in a specific genre, Steam will just show that to fans of that genre. But then the thing is, what if people are not necessarily right? What if there is a bit of a disagreement between the players and the dev, or some players and a dev? What if a tag that people keep on assigning to a game is actually not the genre that the developer intended? And what if that tag actively overrides the tags that the developer themselves has set so that people understand what the developer's game is? That's where it gets interesting, and that is where the guy, Tomas, behind Bulwark, Falconeer Chronicles, has basically done something. So this is what Tomas posted, right? He said, folks, you made me do it. The full title of Bulwark is now Bulwark Falconeer Chronicles, a bloody creative sandbox, not a fucking strategy game. Build some cool shit, expect no endgame, cause it's a sandbox. That's his post. He ended by saying, there, ... I hope that finally clarifies it. Funny little situation. Obviously, that's not what it's called on Steam. On Steam, it is called Bulwark Falconeer Chronicles, a creative building sandbox. It almost reminds me of how some books are listed on Amazon. If you're looking at a book and it'll be like the title of the book, A, and then basically marketing copy, or, now adapted to Netflix. It's a bit weird. This is a really interesting game in a little kind of interesting subgenre that's kind of playing around with what you expect from a game. Now, in recent reviews, basically, the dev, Tomas Sala, has encountered people leaving negative reviews because it wasn't a strategy game with a sort of a campaign or big long-term complexity. So a lot of people, they went in expecting that, and the game did not give them that. And actually, this is something I can speak a little bit personally to. So our game, The Pale Beyond, is it is a narrative game. Yes, resource management. We're going more for taxing sort of EQ in times where a lot of things, how characters will respond, whether you'll lose or gain reputation with somebody, a lot of that is depending on the sort of the character writing, understanding a character's motives, that sort of social thing. But yeah, it is narrative first. Yes, there are strategic role-playing elements, little bit of, management gameplay, but it is not a game like Frostpunk. Even though both games are wintry, or, are set in a cold place. But one thing we found is a lot of people, it's not a humongous amount of people, but it is a few people who purchased the game, they were like, what is this? Why is there a load of text in this game? I thought this was like Frostpunk. And it just turned out people said, well, hey, if you love the vibes of Frostpunk, you'll probably love our game. And that's actually true. I really love our game, and I really love Frostpunk. There's a lot of shared vibes, even though they're very different games. But then for some users, that meant, oh dear, they've bought a game, they didn't like it. And this is actually a really good case for Steam's entire policy with refunds, because I'd rather that person refunds. If they bought our game thinking it's Frostpunk, it's not Frostpunk. You should have your money back. I don't want it. You only want somebody's money if they're going to, play and enjoy your game. That's the whole point. That is basically what this dev has ran into here. People are being served up a game by Steam, and of course its recommendations. They weren't really reading a lot about the game beyond, say, the title and the footage. And then whenever they go and see the full game experience, they end up, of course, leaving some negative reviews. And that does have a knock-on effect in the Steam algorithm. And Tamaz was speaking to PC Gamer, and he basically detailed his whole process of finding out about this. I'll just read the quote. It's really interesting. So, me and the producer at Wired Productions spent a few days trying to figure things out, literally changing all the store text and all that until I finally saw the tags, and it all made sense. That is when my inner little devil came out and said, for fuck's sake, let's just change the title. Pretty sure that can't be changed by anyone but me. And so he went and he did that. Now, he did, in the interview, understand why people could be disappointed. If Steam serves you up a strategy game in a strategy tag and you play it and it's not that, that's a bad user experience, even though it's not really the developer's fault, because it was always made fairly clear with this game that it was more of a creative, creative sandbox. But just real interesting. Obviously, I do think that Steam's recommendation engine is one of the absolute just best, points of value on the platform. I think it is awesome. This is just an interesting little edge case of things not going 100% right. Now, Tamaz did further comment, because there is an obvious thing here where you could say, yeah, but that's just player feedback. They just didn't like a bit of the game. He did say this on Twitter following up. For those thinking I only swear, someone left a positive review tonight with a lot of very specific feedback. A few hours later, public beta has been updated with fixes ready for testing. Gamers that specify their feedback are the best. And I can certainly say in our experience, a lot of the times where we would get a positive or a negative review, but there would really be just strong, actionable stuff. A player saying, this thing was the problem for me. Be it a bit of UI, something not being clear. And that is awesome. Every game dev, whether it's a positive or a negative review, every game dev at least should love that, because it is so useful. It's literally gold. So yeah, it's just an interesting little situation. I think it's kind of nobody's fault. I suppose the thing is, though, because when you look at the game, right, and I mean, visually, it's very stark. The TLDR, right, it's in the Falconeer universe, by the way, if you remember the game Falconeer. So you are kind of building up your settlement. And, there are light strategy mechanics. You can be attacked by pirate raids and stuff. There are other settlements. I think for some people, they maybe look at that and think, okay, well, we're going to be having this sort of town versus town, sort of regional, smaller scale conflicts of maybe a manor lords mixed in with, base building and city building, and maybe thinking that because it is that, but soft touch, with the focus mostly being on the building tech. Because when you look at the building tech and how the settlements actually come together, it's visually stunning. I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous, and it seems to be very inspired by, I think it's called, this game, Townscaper on Steam. And this game is overtly a toy. It never got into the same sort of problem with an audience because it was always so obviously a toy. The idea, though, is the dev behind it just made really cool tech that kind of procedurally generates stuff, and you basically just paint where you want things. It's really just pretty amazing. So what Tamaz has done is take this kind of thing and then make a light touch strategy game, sort of creative sandbox experience. So look, I'd recommend checking it out if it is the sort of thing that's interesting to you. I'd certainly say, for my own personal tastes, I would far rather this was more a strategy game. That being said, it is in early access, And I suppose as he continually hones and refines the game, maybe it would end up being like a little bit closer to the sort of thing that I would be super interested in. As it is right now, though, like if it's on a sale or if I just like catch a fancy, it's totally something I could see myself buying and playing for a bit. But for it to be something I think I'd really play for a long, long time, yeah, I'm probably in the camp of wanting more strategy stuff. But then again, you know, I've always known what's up with this game, and it's not like I only found out about it because I saw it in a Steam tag that really wasn't an accurate representation of the game. So anyway, an interesting thing, there is a wider conversation to have about genres. It's hard to make things fit into genres sometimes. But anyway, I will leave you with that. I hope you found today's video to be interesting. I know some of this stuff won't feel like it could impact your life, but seriously, that stuff going on in Poland, if that goes down in Poland, and then other countries start to think about it, and that kind of starts to happen at the EU level, you could be looking at some pretty serious stuff going down. Anyway, we'll look out for that. I hope you've had a great day, and I will see you again tomorrow.